But I guess so. I'm encouraging everyone to read your book. All the details are in there. But maybe we can start with maybe you can give your kind of your life story and yeah, we'll go from there and I'll ask some questions after that.
Okay. I would love to give my life story. So you mean like the entire thing, like go through
Yeah,
from beginning to end?
yeah,
Okay.
take 10 minutes and so and then basically how where you grew up, how you're born, where you're born, all that stuff. But then of course all the suffering that you experienced.
Okay. Okay. So I was born in India. And when I was 3 months old, I contracted polio. Now, the doctors had no idea what it was. I didn't, in India, they don't give the vaccine till you're 6 months old. So my parents took me to a friend who was a doctor, and she thought I had typhoid because typhoid was going around. So she gave me cortisone to lower my body's fever. I was 105-degree fever, but it lowered my immune system. And within a few days, I was completely paralyzed. And then they took me to the pediatrician, and the doctor said, wow, there's nothing we can do. She has polio. She's going to be paralyzed. And I was at that point a quadriplegic. And they told my parents to leave India because there was no medical services at the time. And in India, when you have any kind of disability, it's much more like a curse on your family. And so that combined with the fact that there's not a lot of services, my parents left as quickly as they could. So my dad, who was a professor in India, left and took a manual job installing telephones in London, manual laborer's job. And so moved to London, which is where I had my first surgery. And I was 2 when I had that. And then we moved to Canada, which is where I started having surgery. So my dad took a job in Canada, and I had 21 operations by the time I was 13. So I lived in the hospital in Montreal for the most part. I lived in the Shriners Hospital. I lived on a ward with about a dozen other girls and was in my bed. I was flat on my back in a body cast for 9 months straight. Only saw my parents on weekends. And so my life growing up was just sort of this half life of being at home, seeing my parents, being close to them, but also being bullied when I was in school. Lots of kids made fun of me. When I was 7 and I had just learned to walk, a group of kids threw stones at me and called me a cripple. So I really didn't know what to make of life when I was home. It was almost harder to be home than to be in the hospital. But lived in the hospital on and off for years. And then when I was probably in middle school, stopped having surgeries. But life at that point became very difficult for someone with a disability. Just felt like I did not fit in and grew very angry at God. My parents were believers, went to church, but I really wanted nothing to do with God.
And the disability, in your later teenage years, that was the walking disability that you had trouble walking.
Yes. So that's a great question. So I walked with a limp, so had a hard time walking far distances, but I could walk. And actually, because of all my surgeries, was actually pretty lived a pretty normal life. Like I could do most of the things that other people could do, but my arms were always really weak, but people could not see that. So I didn't have surgeries on my arms. So they were very, very weak, but that's not something other people can observe. So and I exercised a lot. My arms got stronger. So pretty much looked like everybody else. But my limp is what people noticed and asked me, what's wrong with you?
Okay, yeah.
So that made me feel very different. And I was so, I mean, I couldn't play sports or anything. So it wasn't like a normal life in that sense. So when I was in high school, I got involved in FCA, which is Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And I didn't go because I was an athlete or a Christian, but all the cute guys in my high school went to FCA. So I went too. And a friend and I would sit in the back and talk about boys. But then she went away on a retreat, came back, told me about the Lord and kept talking about it. And so finally, I just asked the Lord. I went home and said, God, if you're real, show me. And really didn't believe that God was going to answer me in any way because I didn't even believe that God existed.
And you were angry
But
at God at this time as well.
yes, yes. So I was really mad at God if he existed. And it was sort of went back and forth between he didn't exist and that was easier to, in some ways, to deal with than if you did exist and let this happen.